So our next agenda item, it's the 10th anniversary of the Okanagan Young Professionals Collective, which is really quite exciting. Hard to believe it's been that long a period of time. And I'd like to pass it over to Tori Baran, who is the OYP Community Coordinator for the next section. Over to you, Corey.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Yes, we all have our little party reactions going here for the 10th anniversary, which also could probably make some of us feel a little bit old who have been involved for most of that time of OYP, which is great. So this morning, I'm just going to introduce all of you to the program and tell you a little bit about what we do, why we do it, and what our plans are for this year, and how you can kind of engage with us, connect with us, or collaborate with us. So as Terry mentioned, I am the community cultivator for the Okanagan Young Professionals Collective, which is a program of the COEDC. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and I just have a couple little slides that you can all see now. So the OYP Collective, there's some images here from our pre-COVID times when we met in person. But basically we do two main things. Our goals are to attract and to retain talent here in the region. And those have been the goals for the last 10 years here. So when we say we want to attract talent, we really want to demonstrate the opportunities that exist here in the region and why someone would want to live here. So we're really kind of think of ourselves as a welcoming committee or ambassadors for the region for those that are looking to move here. And I know many of you probably feel like you are ambassadors in your roles too, and sitting on this advisory board for the region, because we all love to live here. So it's pretty easy to promote it and be passionate about it. Another way we do that is to provide resources and connections to help make that transition for newcomers as seamless as possible. So whether that's connecting them with relocation services, answering their questions on anything from like, what neighborhood do I want to live in? Are there good schools here? Is there an arts culture here? And all sorts of things like that. The next thing we do is we highlight success stories of people here in the region to demonstrate basically what you can achieve when you live here. And we're very lucky that we have so many success stories here that we can highlight, which is great. The second part of what we do on the retention side is really building that community here. And when OYP first started 10 years ago, the focus was mainly on like creating that community for young professionals. And now there's so much going on here and there's so many great pockets of community. What we really want to do is build and connect people with that now. So we connect young professionals who live here, who have just moved here, with people, resources, and opportunities. So there's a lot of emailing and e-intros and coffee meetings and all that stuff. And then we also like to support existing organizations and work with them that help people feel a sense of community here. Because that's what's going to help people stay here in the long term, is to feel like they're a part of something. Some of those organizations that we also support are kind of all the under 40 groups that exist here in the central Okanagan. And there's actually over 10 of them. And those are either industry or community based. And they have, some of them have membership fees to join and some of them don't. So they can range from anything to, there's an association of engineering consultants under 40 group, to young lawyers, to JCI Kelowna and Gen Next. And the last thing we kind of do on the retaining talent side is to identify any gaps that we see in the community where we can help to facilitate an initiative there that might not be able to happen without someone helping to bring people together to collaborate on something. So we work with a lot of community partners, organizations, and especially nonprofits on that end. And kind of the one thing that links these two pieces together that I'm sure if you've been to a meeting before, you've heard of our connector program that my colleague Myrna runs, who is here on the call today. And that's a formalized networking program. And so that both helps bring people who are new to the region and those who are here to get them connected with a network of people that can help guide them to, I mean, primarily they're looking for job opportunities, but other things in the region as well. So the 3 frequently asked questions I get about OYP is, how do I join? I just got an email yesterday that asked, how do I become a member? And we're really a program versus a membership club. So you don't have to join. We are an entity that exists. We do host lots of events, primarily focused around networking and meeting new people. So anyone is welcome to come to any of our events. But yes, there's no membership. We just encourage people to follow us, and I'll share some of those places where you can follow us to keep up to date with what we're doing. The second question I get a lot is, am I too old to join? And no, never. You're never too old to be a part of OYP. Primarily, we're focused on people in their 20s and 30s, but everyone brings value to the table, and we really want to be inclusive. And one of the nice things about us being 10 years old is we've had this following now. So a lot of people that started with OYP are now in their 40s, and still come and hang out to the events, and that they've often become kind of the ambassadors for the younger people that are newer, which is fabulous. And then the final question I usually get is, do I need a degree to be considered a professional? And though the term professional is in our name, and kind of has that connotation of having a degree, or, you know, having to wear, I get a lot of questions like, I don't wear a suit and tie, but we're really open to anyone. So we define like being a young professional as someone who's either like seeking to get to know people or build community, or looking or in a career right now. And yes, everyone is always in their prime, and I was joking at our last meeting, that'll probably be what I look like hanging out at OYP events in my 60s or 70s. So, so for this year, we have kind of 6 main focuses for 2021 that kind of relate back to our 2 main goals. So we want to be a resource hub for people looking for information. So we're really working on building out our website and our blogs to be able to provide information. We want to foster genuine connection. So we really want to create opportunities for people to build a sense of community. And this past year has been so difficult for people to do that because we don't have the same events happening, and we don't have the opportunity to interact with people either outside of our bubble or outside of our home right now. So we've been doing a lot of online events to help assist with that. We would like to seize our advantages, so using our network and people to further our mission. And that's where many of you might come in today when you're learning more about us and thinking about how could we work together. Storytelling is also a huge part of what we do. So we like to share the stories of young professionals in the region and highlight why it's such a great place to live. So we do put out from time to time a call for nominations for people to be featured. And that might be somewhere where you know some young professionals in our community that might be great people to feature. The next piece is connecting the dots. So being a community catalyst to identify those gaps and acting as a facilitator to find solutions. And our last goal for this year is OYP at 10. So we want to celebrate 10 years of achievement and the impact of the program. So our goals for celebrating that are highlighting the impact, so through storytelling of those that have been involved over the last 10 years, and celebrating. And we'd really love to throw a big birthday party, and whether that is in person or virtual, the public health orders will tell over the course of this year, but we do want to celebrate all the achievements of everyone that's come before me and everyone that's participated in the program. And if you have your chat open, you can see Corey just popped in that it was created about 10 years ago to help address the ideas of retaining college and university students. And they anticipated it would run for 1 to 3 years. So a few ways that you can engage with us if you're just curious about what we do. And I do promise we are quite fun as well. So if you're just looking for a break from Zoom meeting and you want to come and check out one of our virtual events, we host coffee socials every month. We have one next Wednesday morning as well, and we use a platform called Kumo Space, which is very fun and interactive, and you move your avatar around a room and you can fill up a virtual wine glass at 8 a.m. without any shame at all. I'd love if you would sign up for our newsletter to get updates of what we're doing, and to follow us on social media. So we do have Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We also have a LinkedIn group. So similar to the COEDC's group, we have a young professional group where people can share job postings and things like that as well. So we want to hear from you, if you have any job or volunteer postings, events or news, ideas to collaborate, blog posts you want us to share or work on together. But primarily we would love for the Advisory Council to be ambassadors for our program and to refer people to them. So whether it is, a neighbor's kid or someone that you know, whether it's your HR department that is onboarding new staff from out of the region and you want to help them feel like part of the community and know what's out there, we hope that you will connect them with us. And I will actually have Sandra send this information out in the minutes, but this is our website, my email, as well as Myrna's email, and then our handles for all our social media as well. So I will stop sharing my screen, and if anyone open it up to, I see Mayor Bazran, who has been a part of OYP since the beginning, has his hand up. If you have a question or comment, Colin, to you.
Just a quick comment. Firstly, I'm shocked that it's been 10 years. It honestly seems like yesterday when myself and Corey and Donnie Ungaro, the first person who ran the program, were meeting and figuring out how we were going to get this off the ground. But so yeah, I did the math, and I don't appreciate doing that quick math about how anyways, age, the time has flown by. But I do want to say, I want to thank Corey for really taking the leap of faith to put this program together. And it has been so successful in terms of helping us retain and attract young people to our community. And so it's just another reason why, because I have no doubt this program has been emulated by other EDCs across the country. But it just is another example of why the one here in the Okanagan is ahead of the class. And so I just want to thank you, Corey, for taking that leap of faith 10 years ago. And this program is so valuable. So if anybody can help continue to promote it, be ambassadors, it is a phenomenal program. And it's one of the reasons why we're attracting the top talent that we are.
Thank you for that, Mayor Bazran. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or need clarification on anything? Feel free to pop in the chat as well. Awesome. So I hope that I can connect with all of you at some point, virtually or over LinkedIn. And thank you for listening, and I will turn it back over to Terry now.
Thank you, Tori. I also can echo the congratulations on the program to everybody involved. I know some people have been involved from the early days and remain involved, and the positive feedback over the years has been fantastic. And in particular, how it's adapted over the last year and kept rolling. So congratulations to you and the program. And I'm excited to know that I could join the Young Professionals program. So look out for that. Anyway, thank you very much, Tori. Our next agenda item is the analysis of the regional workforce data. And we're fortunate today to have Andrew Ramlo with us. And just a little bit about the meeting today. This is the first of a two-part meeting where we're looking at the labor market in the region. We've got data and industry intelligence that are signaling that labor market shortages will return as the most significant regional challenge to economic recovery here. And today's meeting is intended to lay the foundation for a well-informed discussion in our second meeting, which will be held at the end of May. And following today's meeting, staff will be sending out a quick poll to the advisory board to identify the top challenges and trends for discussion in our second meeting on May 28th. And to help us establish that, We're delighted to have Andrew Ramlo with us today. And Andrew is the Vice President of Market Intelligence for the Rennie Group. He's well known to many people on the call today and is highly regarded as one of Canada's most respected demographers and planning consultants. He's known for his balanced and candid analysis of community data, and in particular, as it relates to labor, population, and housing. Andrew is also donating his honorarium today to the Rennie Foundation, who will pass the fee in full to a Central Okanagan nonprofit working in housing or mental health. And if you have any suggestions around that, please contact Krista. So please join me in a warm welcome for Andrew Ramlo, and I'll turn it over to you, Andrew.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Terry. Big crowd this morning. Thank you so much for joining in. Krista, thank you for reaching out to ask me to come out and participate. A couple quick comments. Tori, you don't have to be a local to be an avid promoter of the Central Okanagan or Kelowna. I do so down here from the Lower Mainland all the time. So yeah, double thumbs up. And congratulations on your 10 years. I know I'm really old now as well, and I will reflect what Mayor Bazran said in terms of being so fundamentally important in terms of getting that next generation together, connecting them with some of the older generation like myself, a little grayer, a little older, to move that forward. So congratulations on that. And Janice, the Upper Mainland, can I use that, please? Because that is a great characterization. I absolutely love it. So as Terry said, I'm going to go through, or if anybody's seen any of my presentations before, I'm basically kind of a big data nerd. So I'm going to go through, I don't know, probably 30 or probably 50 or 60 slides of data. I'm going to share my screen and go through the presentation. But what I'm also going to do is for you guys, I'll PDF the presentation, and I will send the data slides up as well. So you guys don't need to scribble the numbers down as they fly by. And just I can see folks up on the side, and just let me reorient my screen here a second, guys. I'm just gonna jump out of here for a sec and do that so I can see my screen, and then. All right, Krista, could you just give me a yes to see you can see my screen there? Or somebody?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, you didn't see my thumbs up. Yes.
Oh yeah, you know
we're all
what?
good.
I took all of the pictures off because I hate actually looking at myself talking when I do these things. So nonetheless, okay, yes, I work for an organization here in the Lower Mainland called Rennie. If anybody doesn't know, we're a real estate marketing company. That being said, when I first started out, I used to run a nonprofit here in the Lower Mainland called the Urban Futures Institute, and our mandate was to look at issues of community growth and change along the lines of demography, economy, and land use. And over time, that nonprofit transitioned from being a nonprofit into a fee-based consulting company because there was just so much demand for what we had done. And then about 5 years ago, as some people say, I kind of turned over to the dark side and moved over wholeheartedly to the real estate side of things. But that being said, real estate is about land use, it's about community, it's about economy. So from my side of things, they are all packaged together. But I do take like a land use as well as a planning longer term outlook at a lot of these things. So within that context, one of the things that we do produce here at Rennie is what we call the Rennie landscape, which is a macro look at factors impacting real estate, be them economic, be them demographic. There's nothing Kelowna focused or Okanagan focused in here. Again, a little bit more macro in terms of geography as well, BC, some Lower Mainland stuff, as well as Canada. We just put our second COVID edition out, and if anybody's interested, you can just jump over to rennie.com/intelligence, and you can get a copy of it as well. You can also sign up for any of our other data feeds as well, if you're interested in any of the nerdy data side of things. So from DC to PC, what lies ahead for court. Now, what we typically do at the office here is we've broken our current situation into 3 different groups. BC is before COVID, DC is during COVID, and PC is post-COVID. So we sort of look at it in these 3 buckets. And so if I go on about talking about PC, I'm not in a politically correct context. I'm talking about post-COVID on that side of things. I do tend to tell a lot of non-PC jokes as I go along. So PC is not my forte in a lot of senses. And in terms of a roadmap, what I thought I'd do is I'm going to talk about a little bit about what we call the Great Suppression. And this certainly goes into some of the economy side of things on labor and jobs. I'm then going to present our outlook for the Okanagan in terms of a long-range population forecast and what some of the implications are there, specifically on the composition of the population and implications for labor. And then I'm going to finish off with a couple of opportunities and challenges. That's an interesting one because I tagged it opportunities and challenges, but I'm more going to focus on what I see as some of the challenges. Your opportunities are pretty obvious and pretty ripe up there. No pun intended for the fruit sector. But anyways, see, I told you bad jokes. Great Suppression. All right. So here is what total employment change looks like out of StatsCan's labor force survey on a monthly basis. Now, the interesting thing is that most economists don't even look at, or we historically did not even look at the monthly data. We would typically look at like a 3-month moving average through any of that data. And so if COVID did one thing, it was to push a lot of us to become a lot more hyper-focused on the daily or the shorter term side of things. And this, in terms of the monthly data from StatsCan, has become much more looked at in much more detail.
Sorry, Andrew, I'm just going to interrupt you a sec. We only see your first slide still.
Oh, get
the
out
thoughtful
of
real estate.
All right, let me just jump out of there. Okay, and I'm going to just stop sharing and then reshare, guys. Just hold on 2 seconds. So let me just see if I can, there's 2 ways to do it here. I can share my Keynote screen, or I can share my, okay, what do you guys see now? Do you see total employment in Canada?
Yes.
Okay, now here, let me just change it. Now, did that change?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just going to back up because this is actually really cool. This is what total monthly employment change looks like in Canada. And the black line moving through there is the 3-month moving average, which is what most economists have historically looked at. Now, because of COVID, everybody is looking at this on a monthly side of things. And a lot of the data feeds that we have, we're actually looking at things on a daily basis, and that's specifically on the real estate side of things as well. So the amount of data, the frequency of data has actually become much more significant as a result of COVID as well. But you can see that 133,000, that was the largest month over month decline in jobs that Canada saw in that 2008-2009 global financial crisis. And I kind of joke with my colleagues, if one of the things that COVID has also done, it's forced me to rescale all of my charts. Here's what it looks like as a result of COVID, as through March and April, we lost about 3 million jobs Canada-wide. Now, we all know we've lived through it. We've seen it certainly come back. Since then, to March of 2021, Canada-wide, we've picked up about 2.7 million jobs. So that's about a 90% gain of the jobs that were lost. So like thumbs up on that side, we're doing relatively well within the global context of reflating the economy. But that being said, we're still 296,000 short at the national level. Now, this becomes even more interesting if we look at the province of BC. We lost about exactly the same pattern. We lost about 411,000 jobs in that March and April timeframe. But since then, we've gained back about 430,000. So the really astute of you out there are going to go like looking at my numbers going, man, that's actually a bigger number. And you guys are right. 105% of the jobs that we lost in March and April have actually been regained. So BC is actually the only province in Canada that has seen its economy grow back beyond what we had lost during that March and April timeframe. So on the one hand, super great news. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that all is good and we're going to just continue to steam on. There's still a lot of people within travel, tourism, service-based side of our economy within the province who may not be working, who are underemployed, or may have had to fundamentally change or shift exactly what they're doing to make ends meet on a day-to-day basis. So all of that said, we are faring relatively well in compared to a lot of the other jurisdictions across Canada, especially if we look back east into Ontario, who is again going back down into a very, very significant lockdown on their economy side of things. This has actually seen our unemployment rate go from that 13 to 14% range, both provincially as well as nationally, back down into the range, about 7% for BC, about 8.8% for Canada as a whole. So again, historically, we've seen a little bit of lower unemployment rate than the national average, but because of our ability to reflate the economy in a couple of different ways, we've actually beat that out a little bit as well. How about Kelowna? Okay, so I was virtually up in Kelowna in January as part of my annual UDI talk, and this is the slide that I had presented. The December data were the most recent that were available there, and you guys at that point, you had lost about 8,300 jobs in the Kelowna CMA and gained back about 11,000. So that was about 133% of the jobs that were lost had been rehired. So super kudos to you guys. Big thumbs up on that front. Oh, and you know what, Krista, I do see some comments coming up there, but I can't actually see what they are because I'm in presentation mode. If there's anything that's come up technologically, then please feel free to jump in again.
Perfect. I was waiting for you to take a breath.
I'll do it at the end of my presentation.
We do see that little pop-up that says build order on your screen.
Oh my God, really?
And that is covering some of your data.
No, okay, you know what? This is kind of weird. Give me a second here. I'm gonna do this one more time. I'm gonna stop sharing. I do not know why. Usually 99% of the time, if I share my desktop, I'm gonna go back here. And then I'm going to go here and I'm going to go play one more time. Okay. So do you guys, what do you, that looks good now?
Yeah, that looks good now.
Okay, great. So this was what I had. Good. And you know what, please jump in audibly if there's anything else comes up. So this is what I presented in December. At this point, BC had only picked up about 80% of the jobs that we had lost during that March and April timeframe. So you guys were performing well better on the economy side of things than the provincial average or the national average, or in comparison to the Lower Mainland or Victoria for that matter as well. So super thumbs up. It was a super interesting one to actually dig in and look at. Now, a couple of interesting things have happened since December. On the one hand, StatsCan has actually revised all of their historical data. In their utmost wisdom, they thought that it was a really good idea right now, before we have our census in 2021, which comes up in May, to revise for the 2016 boundaries and population counts from the 2016 census. Smart guys, right? Get it done before you conduct your next census. So that resulted in a change in the historical database going back, and rather than 133% repatriation of your economy, it was actually came out to be 136% up to that December point. So that was the one interesting thing that happened. The other interesting thing that happened was that you guys in the last 3 months have actually seen declines. So a 1,400 job loss in January, 1,500 in February, and about 2,200 in March. So rather than this big 136% to the end of the year, you guys, if I do the math on that to take the whole post-April period, that's about an 83% reflation of your economy, or the number of jobs that were lost. Some may think of that as a bad thing, but it really depends on how you look at the data. So here's what the total employment looks like all the way back to 2006. And there's the last 3 months of what an economist, or most people who look at the data, would call the month-over-month change. And that's taking the level of jobs in March and subtracting them from the month before. So this is where we get that 83% job loss. All of that being said, if I look back historically through the data, this December, January, February, March period going back over the last decade has historically been associated with a bit of a pullback with regard to employment within the Kelowna CMA. Now, these data, they are a 3-month moving average, so they do tend to, they overestimate and underestimate depending on which direction the trends are moving in, whether it's an up or a down. They are also supposed to be seasonally adjusted. To further seasonally adjust it, if I flip it around and don't look at the month-over-month change, but look at the year-over-year change. So this is taking the March data from this year and comparing it to the March data from last year, or the January data from this year and comparing it to the January data from last year. We actually still do see an increase. And so this would be further seasonally adjusting the data to account for that little bit of pullback that you guys traditionally see in the early stages of the year. So not necessarily a bad scenario in terms of seeing some of that pullback. I'd say that in part it's natural. And some of the big growth that you guys saw through the summer and fall up to December, I think is probably certainly driven by the notion of, one, the staycation. I know I was up there in August for a little bit of a reprieve while we were able to travel, and it was packed. So really interesting on that side. I think that as we move back into a situation where we are able to travel a little bit more and stuff starts to ease, that you guys will move back into that situation of seeing relatively strong growth on the service side of your economy. So that being said, let's look at the unemployment rate. There's what the 3-month moving average for the Canadian unemployment rate is, and there's where you guys sit right now. So 5%, that's just, again, you're moving back down towards historical lows with regard to where your unemployment rate is. The economists all say an unemployment rate of sort of 3 to 4% range. Well, that is what they would call structural. That's just the bare minimum level of unemployment you need for people to change jobs, retrain, move homes and households, and be unemployed for a short period of time. So in very quick order, you guys have moved back down to that particular level. If I look at other jurisdictions within the province, the interesting one is you and Victoria are the two that have sort of vied for this lowest unemployment rate within the province. And I'm also going to say, by and large, across the country, there's not a lot of other jurisdictions that historically have been in the same range of unemployment that you guys have. But right now, Victoria sits at 8% relative to year 5. So again, a much different context with regard to economy and the jobs base here as well, which does paint, again, this is the opportunities versus challenges, some challenges in terms of moving forward. Great if you're somebody looking for a job, not so great if you are an employer looking for people to actually fill positions. Now, we also know that at least at the national level, or at the provincial level, I can do this in a little bit more detail. It's the service-based economy, or the service-based side of the economy, that was differentially impacted. Accommodation and food, 20% of the job losses provincially, but only 6% of the jobs. Similarly, if I look at other services like personal services, 8% of the job losses, but only 5% of the jobs. So again, it's been that service-based economy that has been really challenged. Some of it is certainly come back, but if we look and see who's faring well, primary, this is agriculture, food specifically, as well as forestry, local manufacturing, as a lot of the supply chains broke down, a lot of the local manufacturing shifted gears, geared up, specifically some senses in terms of making protective equipment. And then fire is the finance, insurance, and real estate. And we know that with mortgage rates and lending rates falling, the real estate industry has been on fire recently. Again, no pun intended, but this just isn't indicative of the Lower Mainland or the province of BC or Kelowna. This is something that's happening right straight across the country. And in large part, the finance and insurance side of that is certainly related or tied to the real estate component for that particular sector. How about Kelowna? So for Kelowna, the labor force survey is a relatively small sample. It's a sample of about 50 to 60,000 households in Canada. So we do get a lot of variance. So for Kelowna, I managed to bundle stuff up into two broad groups. That's the service producing side of your economy and then the goods producing side of the economy. And if I look at it on this industry side of things, we look at the March-May losses from COVID, about 5,800 losses on the service producing side, same as a provincial level, very similar pattern. Goods producing did lose a little bit, but not to the same degree as the service producing side of things. If we look at the during COVID gain, so this was the June to December period, 4,200 gain on the goods producing side. But this is where I see that sort of that rambunctious summertime up there, and a lot of people heading up to Kelowna for some vacations and supporting that service side of the economy. A 5,600 person gain in terms of jobs on that front. So on a net basis, only about a 200 loss in terms of the service side of things, and about a 2,500 gain into December. Now, as I said, you guys have seen the most recent 3 months in terms of a little bit of a decline as well. So if I go and look at that, all of that decline was brought about by the service side of things. 5,400 net gain if we look at January, February, and March as well. But if I turn it around on the service-based side of things, that's about a 7,100 loss. So again, that service side of the economy is typically what would pull back in that January, February, March timeframe, and probably going to grow from that period as the summer starts or the spring starts and people start to travel again. This is all certainly layered on top of our ability to travel with respect to provincial health orders as well. So there's sort of the picture in terms of where we've come through in terms of jobs and the labor side of things in the economy, from the national level all the way down to you guys as well. And it looks like, at least on the West Coast, whether you be the upper mainland or the lower mainland, the employment picture has recovered relatively quickly and relatively well. I'd say that much quicker than any economist would have ever predicted. But what also has really emerged is sort of use this a tale of two cities or tale of two types of cities. You guys have gained back more jobs than you've lost and now have one of the lowest metro unemployment rates in Canada. But there's other jurisdictions out there that are still feeling some significant pain on this front. That would be broad jurisdictions in terms of cities, but then also smaller jurisdictions with regard to municipalities that are particular smaller cities within the provinces. All of that being said, at an individual level, COVID really has sort of laid bare some of the inequities within the economy and has really showed us how vulnerable some sectors are as well. It's resulted in fundamental shifts in how some people work. So like the types of work that people are doing, when they work, literally the time of the day, are they moved on to night shift? And then for who or whom, and this would be with regard to a particular industry or occupation that people are working within. So it looks good at the top side in terms of the aggregate numbers, but we always have to realize that the devil is in the detail, and there's a lot of folks, sectors of the economy out there that are still really, really challenged in terms of what COVID has thrown us into. So that's what we call the Great Suppression in terms of the economy side of it. Interestingly, the analogy works really well. We can look at it even on a mobility and migration side of things. We've suppressed immigration in the short term, as well as we've locked down our borders and a whole bunch of other stuff. So let's turn over to that side of things and look at our new outlook for the Okanagan. So back in 2017, we saw the federal government embark on a new policy direction with regard to immigration. They were targeting at that point in 2017, they said next year, so 2018, they wanted to move immigration targets up to 340,000 a year by 2020. And then in 2018, they revised that and said they went a little bit farther and a little bit bigger and said by 2021, God, we want to hit 350,000. And through the last quarter of 2018 and 2019, this policy change, the fruit was coming to bear, and we did see some record levels of growth in terms of population that was a direct result of increasing those immigration targets as well. Now, in early 2019, so this was, or sorry, early 2020, this was January 2020, RBC came out and said aging population and climate change were the two biggest challenges to Canada's economy through the 2020s. So then that was January of 2020, and then 2 months later, COVID struck. Unfortunately, this sort of went away with regard to some of the big highlights in terms of consideration for Canada's economy through the 2020s. The crazy thing about COVID is, yeah, it's had an impact on migration, it's had an impact on fertility rates, birth rates, it's had an impact on mortality rates. The one thing that it hasn't changed is that sort of the cardinal rule of demography, and that's just about everybody gets older every year. So we're still going to continue to age. It's just about everybody, because there are some people who die each year. And so this notion from RBC in terms of our aging population, it is still equally as true in a DC situation during COVID or a PC situation in terms of post-COVID as well. So the interesting thing here is at year end of last year, 2020, we only had about 184,000 permanent residents who landed in Canada, and that was our lowest level since 1998. And the target, just to refresh memories, it was about 340,000. So a relatively wide gap in terms of the number that came versus the number that we were expecting or hoping for. Now, full disclosure, early on in this, we actually had anticipated, I had anticipated that with unemployment rates in the range of 13–14% nationally, that the federal government would sort of pare back with their immigration expectations or targets were until the unemployment rate came back down to reasonable levels. Now, we've moved back down to that quote unquote more reasonable level relatively quickly. And we also saw a very fundamental or significant policy shift as well, or a policy pivot. And this is Canada's immigration plan for 2021 to 2023, where rather than the 350,000 target, well, we're now targeting 401,000 in 2021, 411,000 in 2022, and 421,000 in 2023. So the federal government here is using immigration as a little bit of an economic lever to try and stimulate the economy, but they're also just trying to make up for the losses or the immigration that we didn't see through 2020 as well. Again, the reason why they're doing this is because we are continuing to get older and we do have this demographic imperative to grow so that we can see young people come and fill up the labor force as our post-World War II boom starts to age into retirement. Here's what it looks like in terms of the components of change. That immigration level down to 184, going up to 421,000. Our expectation is that that'll sort of level out at about, or fall back down to about 0.85% of the Canadian population. As a point of comparison, the 421, that takes us up to just above 1% of the Canadian population in terms of an immigration rate. Crazy thing about that, even with that higher level of immigration, natural increase, so the black line on there, actually becomes natural decrease in Canada at about 2035, 2036, and that's the point at which there's more deaths annually than there are births, and all net growth in Canada is going to be a result of immigration at that point. So really, really interesting in terms of the components of change. So the big question here is, well, what are the implications for British Columbia and our metro regions? Well, you guys, in coming through 2011, 2016, and then into 2020, you guys were one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. So the Greater Kelowna area had an increase of about 1.9% in its population as per StatsCan's estimates. That was equating to growth of around 4,000 people from 2019 to 2020. So this is in that early and sort of BC, before COVID, and early COVID period as well. So you guys were seeing already some pretty significant population growth. Without new numbers on the demography side of things for another little bit, I would say that there's expectations that these numbers are going to go up as well. This is a push into some of those areas like Kelowna, highly amenity rich areas that are still connected on the transportation and infrastructure side of things. And then also just allowing people technologically to work from remoter areas. Not that Kelowna is remote, but just this notion of being able to work from just about anywhere. So what does this mean in terms of our outlook for you guys? Well, there's the components of change for the Central Okanagan region. And you can see there's that sort of that short-term hump in terms of immigration levels increasing in the next 2 to 3 years, and then sort of flatlining as the numbers flatline or come back down at the national level, and they work their way through the province and down into the Okanagan region in our population models. The interprovincial and intra-provincial ones are really super interesting to me. You look at the dark gray line, that's interprovincial. That's the smart kids from Ontario like myself moving westward for literally greener climates. That's been a relatively strong driver of growth within the Okanagan region since about 2012. We certainly expect it to continue to be that situation. But the intra-provincial one is a really interesting one. This is the movement within the province of British Columbia. And we actually see that not just driven as a result of COVID, but that actually becoming a little bit more significant in the coming years. In part, we feel that this is going to be driven by what we call the equity refugees here in the Lower Mainland. Also maybe over in Capital Region as well. And that equity relates to equity in primary residences and the ability of people within some of the larger metropolitan regions to capitalize on equity that they've built up in their homes. And this be for the younger set now as well, given where real estate prices have gone to, and then most certainly for that older set as they start to contemplate retirement. And so we see that driving up that interprovincial or intra-provincial number over the longer term. Now, you guys, in terms of the natural increase side of things, you're already in negative situation, more deaths on an annual basis than births. Victoria is just about the same, but to a much larger degree. And that sort of notion of demography, that everybody getting older every year, there's going to be more and more people aging into the older stages of the life cycle where mortality rates increase. So that notion of an increasing number of deaths, increasing over time certainly is there, and natural increase becoming more negative over time. So what does it look like going forward? 222,000 in 2020 is what the estimate for the region was. Again, we model this in terms of all its individual components. So if I just look at aging and deaths, your population would fall to about 157,000. So that's like 60,000 and change deaths. For some people, mortality is like a really scary thing. For me, I take it on the other side. I look at it not a half empty, but the half full, and say that, yeah, 60,000 deaths, it's a lot of deaths, but that means that about 73% of you guys are still going to be kicking around by 2041. So good on you for that. That's this notion of long and increasing life expectancies. If we add the number of births in there, 197, still not enough to compensate for the number of deaths that are going to occur. And it's not until we layer in these notions of international and domestic migration that we see the population grow relatively significantly from about 222,000 to upwards of just over 300,000. So in terms of additions, that means about 83,000 more folks in the Central Okanagan region over the next 2 decades. It's kind of an elusive number for a lot of folks. So to put some context to it, over the past 21, you guys grew by about 73,000. So the implication here is that the Central Okanagan region is going to grow more dramatically over the coming 2 decades than what it has over its previous 2. So if you think that it's gotten busy in the last 2 decades, it's probably going to get much busier within the coming 2. All right. So my key insight here is that, yep, you guys are expected to add more people in the coming 2 decades than in the past, and growth is going to be certainly driven by a growing and diversifying economy, as it has been in the past. But we also have to layer this with one of the most, what I would call, amenity-rich settings in the province of British Columbia, and I'd probably say in Canada as a whole. So back to Tori, me being like a big advocate of the Central Okanagan region. Yes, it certainly is, but I think anybody who spent any time there and lives outside of it, it's pretty easy to see what the opportunities are on that front. All right. So some quick opportunities and challenges in terms of what I see for you guys moving forward. This is what the Central Oregon looks like to a demographer. So that's males on the right and females on the left, and increasing age up the side. It kind of looks like a Dvorak, an ink blot, but it's not. And this is what you guys look like in 2020. And you can see that big bulge at the top. That's that post-World War II boom generation, are now between the ages of 55 and 75. And in moving forward, it's not just growth that is an opportunity, as well potentially as a constraint. If you look at things like maybe transportation infrastructure within the cities and the regions up there, it's actually changes in its composition that do show some significant opportunities and some challenges as well. There's what your 83,000 new residents looks like between now and 2041. And if I look at the labor side of things, our forecast is that 25 to 64 population to grow by about 34%. There's about 41,000 more workers. But that 65 and better population, it's about a 65% growth, 31,000 more seniors. So some constraints or some challenges here. One, servicing that older population. The services required for that older population, you guys, as well as many other places within the province, aren't used to dealing with that scale of a seniors population. So certainly from an infrastructure side of things, there's going to be some challenges in dealing with that. But also I'd flip it around and look at, in terms of the more worker side of things, that's a relatively robust increase in that stage of the life cycle in that 25 to 64 population. So I'd say that one of the challenges that you guys are going to face is actually attracting that level of workers. So nice to hear from Tori in terms of trying to retain and attract some of the younger generation in terms of entrepreneurs. I only say that in terms of attraction because most other jurisdictions within Canada and around the world who experienced a post-World War II boom are going through this demographic challenge, and everybody is going to be scrambling for that young labor force population as well. So competition for them is going to be much stronger in years going forward than they have been in the past. On the flip side, the kids side of things, relatively low fertility rates, about 1.6 kids per female right now in the province of British Columbia, would lead to a relatively slow growth in the number of kids, only about a 20% growth in that under 25 population relative to these other two population groups. So there's certainly some opportunities and some challenges with just purely within the demography and the demographic shifts that are expected from your population in the coming 2 decades. The other one in terms of constraint does go back to, it relates to what I was saying about being able to attract and retain the younger set, that high labor force participation stage of the life cycle. And that's housing. How do you house 83,000 more residents? So what are the implications for that on the housing front? We take a demographic approach to try and answer that question. This is what I would call the life cycle of housing occupancy. In a technical sense, they're household maintainer rates or household formation rates. And you can see in the young stages of the life cycle, 20 to 24-year-old age group, under 24%, under a quarter of the population are actually maintaining their own home. As we get older, we figure that like sneaking out of the basement really sucks all the time. So we go out and we form households of our own, and we can see that by the 30 to 34-year-old age group, that formation rate is actually just about doubled, almost to 50%. And then it's relatively consistent and high through the family rearing stages of the life cycle. And interestingly, it only really drops off towards the older stages of the life cycle as we get to that 85 plus age group, and people transition either from being a primary household maintainer on their own to living with family, that notion of a sandwich generation, or into collective and institutional accommodation, which is deemed to be private accommodation. So we take this life cycle of housing on an age-specific basis, and we can apply that into the population forecast. And in doing that math, what we arrive at is, in order to accommodate the 37% growth in your population, the total housing stock would need to grow by about 41%. That's about 38,000 new homes over the next 2 decades. So again, the number seems kind of big and elusive to folks. So as a point of context here, the census counted about 12,450 occupied dwellings in West Kelowna in 2016. So that growth, it's like about adding 3 new West Kelownas to the region in the next 2 decades. So relatively significant growth in terms of the housing stock that's needed to accommodate that population. So that's about 2,000 net new units a year. How have you guys been doing? This is where it becomes really, really interesting. If I look at the supply side of things, the red line is housing starts. So that's just gross housing starts from Canada Mortgage and Housing. And then there's completions as well as the gray line. And we can see that even on a net basis, 1,874 housing starts, it falls below that 2,000 average level that's required going forward. Now, this is also gross housing starts. If I net that down for the number of demolitions that occur to actually make those starts, it's about 10 to 12%. You guys are falling below what I would say from a demographic side of things is needed to accommodate future population. Super cool thing about housing starts is that because they've already been started, we can use them to forecast forward. So a housing start today is going to be a housing completion by and large within the next 2 to 4 years. So here you go. Here's what the housing completions look like within the next 2 to 4 years within the central Okanagan region, falling well below that level of about 2,000 in terms of additions that would be required given the broad notion of population growth and change. The other cool data set that we can look back to is monthly building permits. This is again compiled by StatsCan, and you can see that if starts are completions within the 2 to 4 year time frame, building permits are the completions in the, let's say, 4 to 6 or 7 year time frame, depending on the scale of the project. And through 2020, there was only applications for Kelowna CMA for about 1,575 units going forward. So in addition to falling below the 2,000, it falls well below historical averages that we've seen over the last 3, 4, 5 years as well. So in terms of my key insight here, you guys are moving into a period of relatively constrained housing supply and growing demand. And I was back to do a UDI presentation in 2016, 2017, when we saw that big ramp up in terms of housing starts. And I had said the obverse at that point to say, guys, you should start the building side of things, the development and construction side should just be wary that your population isn't growing at the same pace as what you're adding units at. That being said, that changed very significantly with regard to a downturn in terms of the number of starts. So what is this going to do? Well, it has a potential to lead to more downward pressure on housing availability, which will in turn push up prices. So the interesting thing about that net new 2,000 units a year, that's just to stand still and accommodate what future growth is. If we want to address any existing issues of housing availability or affordability within the region or within the city, well, we've got to build in excess of that in order to address some of those issues as well. So I do think that this is a big challenge. It does speak in a lot of different ways to the ability for you guys, not just with respect to availability and affordability of housing, but attractability and retention of a workforce as well. So most communities in the province are already experiencing these issues of available and affordability. And as I said, you guys, in terms of net new building, you're going to need to exceed some of those levels of about 2,000 net new units a year if we're going to go and address some of the existing issues of housing affordability within the region. So with that, I'm going to finish off with this slide and kick it back to you guys. This is actually an art installation that graces the top of our building here at 51 East Pender. And I only put it up there because, yes, COVID has been a super challenging time. And whenever I talk to my mom, she says, you know what, it's okay. Everything is going to be all right. And it's just kind of apropos to finish off on. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and go back to my gallery view and turn it back to you guys for questions.
Excellent. So I'm going to do my best to facilitate questions to Terry. So Sandra's still having some tech issues. So if you could use the raise hand feature, I think that most of you are familiar with that by now on the reactions button. We'll try and get you in order. Otherwise, feel free to send a note to myself in the chat.
Okay, I'm going to jump right in because there is one here in the chat, and I was quick enough to just jump over to it. It's what sectors are seeing the significant job gains, which are offsetting some of the losses on the tourism and travel side. It's interestingly, it's the manufacturing side of things, and the details for the Kelowna region are, again, because of small sample size on the labor force survey, I sort of hesitate a little bit to dig down super into the industry specific detail. But at least if I look at generally speaking for Kelowna, but then more specifically for the province as well, it's been primary, which is the food production side of things. The notion of sort of local production has certainly come up and supported some of that agriculture and primary side of things and expanded jobs on that front. But then also the manufacturing side of things, we've seen grow very significantly. And this is back to the notion of the supply chains globally being shut down, and in order to get stuff generally that we want has been more challenging, and has caused some local manufacturers, local being within the province and within Canada, these are trends that we see Canada-wide, being able to ramp up and provide some of that, backstop some of those supply chain breakdowns and provide some of that, the goods that we typically have not manufactured locally, or to manufacture them to a larger degree. So there you go, there's one.
I'll add to that, and this wouldn't be represented in the data given our sample sizes as well, but we have seen strong growth on the tech side of things, and I'm sure that those working in that world on the call today can attest to that. So strong hiring growth in our tech sector.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating one for you guys as well. And there's certainly a big push on the COVID side of things as we all become more used to dealing with Zoom calls and technical difficulties. Sorry about that. It is going to be one of the new normals in terms of people being able to work in a little bit more of a remote situation. All of that being said, I will add that if anybody in the tech side of things wants to chime in, we remember back to the 1990s tech boom, and when broadband sort of came in as well, there was this big push from a lot of organizations to say, everybody can work from home. We're going to downsize offices, take your computers and go home. And like, this is a brave new world in terms of work-life balance. And what they found was that within the first couple of years of that test, people were itching to get back to the office, actually. And we did see like a shrinking of floor plates here within the Lower Mainland on the office side during that early tech boom, not as a result of the bust, but I think as a result of just human nature and the ability for us, or the need for us to socialize. A lot of people did re-expand their floor plates as well and welcome people back into the office. So I think some of that will certainly occur in a PC situation, but we are moving into this brave new world of everybody becoming the new norm for us as well.
Thank you. We have Chair Given with her hand up next.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Presentation is fascinating. I always enjoy your presentations.
Thank you.
I have a thought around historically skilled labor force has been our greatest challenge to attract. But when we combine our attainability of housing and its challenges going forward, do you see potentially the bigger challenge being attracting labor force that is at maybe a lower salary scale? Like, where will our big challenges come in attracting labor force? I'm sure it will happen across all sectors, but I think about the service sector having lost so many jobs. While they've been gone, the housing costs have soared. And so is it going to be the skilled labor force that is our greatest challenge, or is it going to be somebody else?
You know, that is a fascinating question. And my easy flippant answer is it's going to be both. And you alluded to that as well. Housing has become more expensive for everybody, whether that be, it doesn't matter what income level you're at, the prices are going up astronomically in most jurisdictions. But that being said, I think that there is certainly a differential impact, and you look at what rents have done And that's where it becomes really, really important for one, that service-based side of the economy. But the other interesting stat, I guess, that I can point to on the rental side of things is that mobility is highly tied to rental tenure as well. And so, whether it be an immigrant or somebody, again, the smart kids moving from Ontario to Kelowna, they typically land in the rental side of things, at least initially. They may transition into the ownership side of things. So again, it's back to the notion of availability from my side of things, and the ability for you guys to attract that I don't want to call it's not the unskilled side of the labor force, it's the lower skilled side of the labor force. And so, yeah, I do think that that's going to be a big issue, especially as we see a lot of the focus being on, adding nice, at least here in the Lower Mainland as well, adding condos is where the big push is as well. Fortunately, we've seen a bunch of the developers shift and transition some of their condo developments into the rental sector, which is just fundamentally needed. But that's as a result of some of pretty lucrative financing from CMHC and from the federal government as well, helping out on that front. And so, yeah, I would say that to try and figure out how to support that, the rental side of things is going to be really super important in terms of maintaining that service-based side of your economy.
And a follow-up question, if I may, do you have data on, because availability was your comment, it triggered me a thought around short-term rentals. And do you have reliable data that would indicate short-term rentals are taking inventory out of the rental marketplace? And basically, we have a scattered site hotel operating all over our communities. Is this really an issue, or is it a perceived issue?
You know what, for Kelowna, I just have to say, I do not have the data, or I have not looked at it for the Kelowna region. We've looked at it here in the Lower Mainland, and yes, it has taken some stuff out of the rental side, the longer term rental side of things. But if we actually look at what the magnitude is, the numbers aren't huge. Like, it's not enough to say that, oh, well, the vacancy rate goes from, it's 1% vacancy rate to 2%. Like, it's marginal in terms of the calculation. That's for the Lower Mainland here. You guys, because of your travel and tourism focus up there, it may be a much different situation. I'd probably say that if I were to earmark anything in terms of trying to dig down into the data for you guys, for your region, that would probably be a good one.
Thank you. I see we've got a couple of people in the queue for questions, so maybe pass it over to Paula Quinn, and then Jason Friesen is up after that.
Yeah, my question is that, we need all these houses and we can see how we're booming. But when I look around, it's where are we going to build them? Where is the land going to come from? Where are we going to find that? How are we going to be able to sustain that and keep the infrastructure that we've got, or even expand that to accommodate? I just see that as a real long-term issue. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the availability is, but I think it's something that we really need to address.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I have to put my planner's hat on for that side of things and say that what we're going to have to do is to use the existing residential land base way more efficiently than what we have in the past. I can't speak to the Kelowna situation in terms of the specific data, but I know that years and years ago, I wrote a couple of papers. I looked at research in terms of the number of empty bedrooms. And I hate to say it this way, but the notion is that we've got, in addition to a large segment of our population aging into the retirement stage of the life cycle, they're also aging into the empty nester and what I call the empty bedroom stage of the life cycle. We need to get a much better match between occupancy and housing needs in that sense. And to allow a lot of our communities, predominantly the single detached side of things, to densify, whether that be in moving out the seniors or the post-World War II boom generation that are there with a whole bunch of empty bedrooms into more suitable housing and allowing the next generation of families to move into it, being more efficient, or allowing it to do things like duplex or triplex, or become a land assembly and add some higher density. So I think those are going to be our keys to adding the population or accommodating the population. You guys are like we are here in the Lower Mainland. You are geographically constrained. You've got the water, you've got the mountains, and you've got the agricultural land as well that you don't want to bump into. So very constrained on that side. And we're going to need to look at kind of like BC Hydro years ago in terms of their power smart. They would pay you to take your old clunky fridge away so that they could be more efficient and not have to add more capacity in terms of generation capacity. What we probably need to do is to take the old clunky home away, or the people who are over occupying it and let the next generation go into it, or let it transition into duplex, triplex, or some higher density housing. Thanks, Paula. Good question.
Thank you. Jason, are you, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think you answered some of my question in the last response there. I guess part of the challenge is looking at the demographic that will be moving into our area, and trying to figure out what that desired home will look like. Do you have any stats on that? You know, in that age bubble, I think the bubble was 25 to, what was it, 20 to 45 in that bubble that we're going to see. Is there any information that provides the desired home type in there, within that demographic?
Yeah, this is another really great question. And the neat thing, or the challenging thing about the data, are that in large part the data, so the desires, are formed by what's available. And so I do see that it's kind of like a chicken and an egg conversation. And I'd say that what's being provided is what's going to be taken up. And this goes back to the previous question as well. I think that if I had to speak a little bit more in generalities, that we are going to be moving more towards higher density living. Does that mean everybody that we're going to force all of that next generation of not just homeowners, but householders into condos? Well, not necessarily, but if we're able to densify and add row houses and duplexes, that's going to be the new single detached. And for those that want or need that single detached side of things, they're either going to pay a premium for it, or they're going to have to travel, and that stuff will be added on more on the outskirts of our urban areas. So it's not really a direct response to your question, but we are definitely, because of constrained land bases, moving into higher density housing. I don't think that means everybody cramming into 30-story condo towers. We've got to be a lot smarter about how we're adding stuff. And I think that gentle infill to provide housing for what, again, it's the sort of the new term down here is that missing middle, which is commonly thrown around. And it's kind of a good terminology. It's the missing middle for the demography side of things, that 25 to 45 group trying to get into the housing market. It's the middle in terms of density as well. It's not single detached, and it's not the high density condo as well. So I think that the real key is some of that gentle density to fill in for that missing middle side of things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Krista, any other pressing questions?
We don't have any more questions. I see that Sharon Hughes Geeky has made a great point in the chat that I would encourage everyone to look at, which is challenges with increased senior population and lack of healthcare workers. And interestingly enough, on the other side of that, following this meeting, I'll be joining the Kelowna Childcare Connections Advisory Council to talk about childcare as the other challenge that we're likely to see as we move forward.
This is a great point as well. And I think that you guys also have to recognize that I'm talking about like the Kelowna region in terms of its sort of aging and changing demography, but you guys are like a health hub within the upper mainland, so much broader than just the Kelowna RD as well. So, and this is focusing some of the specialties at the hospital as well, cancer. So, you know, you guys sort of have it doubly good or doubly bad in terms of trying to deal with some of issues of aging population, because it's not just your local population that you're going to be dealing with as you deal with the communities that surround you guys as well in terms of some of their healthcare implications.
Great. Terry, I see that we're almost out of time, but we have Dr. Barker with his hand up there. So I think we have time for one or maybe two more questions.
Great. Thanks, Krista. Andrew, thanks for the great presentation. Just a question on what's happening on the lower mainland and how it may eventually relate to the upper mainland as we go through this major demographic shift. One of the things that I see in young people, including my own, 20 to 30 age children who live in large urban centers, is a real reluctance to own automobiles and to switch to either living close to work or using various forms of public transit. And I'm wondering what you see in your surveys and data as the long-term trends along that lines. Is that a blip, or is that going to become a permanent feature that we should be thinking about as we move forward in considering options?
I'd say it's a permanent feature, Phil. It's something that is a longer term. It's not just COVID related. It is something that we have seen for that the next generation coming in terms of the automobile registration rates, as well as outside of automobile registration. It's just pure licensing. It's actually the number of kids who don't even have licenses is increasing as well, and that certainly necessitates either fundamental change with respect to how they get around public transit or where they're living as well. And the interesting thing is that I think for that generation, yes, some of it will stick. And this is where it becomes really interesting in terms of whether we're talking about an age group specifically or an age cohort and tracking that cohort. I think that certainly over time, as some of that, the millennials who are saying, no, you know what, I want to be close to transit and I don't care to have an automobile. When they have kid number one and maybe even kid number two, and they got to get them to soccer and violin and hockey and all of that kind of stuff, some of those notions do change a little bit. So I think that it is probably a permanent feature, not for that generation, but for that age group in terms of a life cycle or a life stage that they would age through. That being said, some of them will maintain it. And we know that, Cole Harbour the Cole Harbour School was overrun with kids. In part, it was because, from my perspective, bad planning on the school board side of things, but there was a lot more kids realized in the towers in Cole Harbour down here than what were initially expected. So there will be some who stick to that, but again, I know I've got two young kids, and man, oh man, I couldn't even imagine trying to get them around on transit to all the things that they're involved in. So I do think it will change as they age into some of those older stages of the life cycle.
Great, thank you, Andrew.
Okay, I want to be cognizant of everybody's time today. Andrew, I'm always amazed at how you can take your nerdy data and present it in such a fashion that keeps 50 plus people engaged. And I think I speak for everybody that this is absolutely set the foundation for our next meeting at the end of May. So you exceeded our desire when you with your presentation today. Always appreciate that. And on behalf of everybody here, I just want to again extend a thank you for both your time and for donating your honorarium to a local nonprofit. That's absolutely fantastic. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And just again, I'll throw it out to all 50. If there's any questions that come up, you guys, I live and breathe this stuff. I love it. And I have reams and reams of data that I'm more than happy to share with everybody. So please feel free to reach out if any other questions come up as well.
And if you don't mind, I'll jump in as well and offer my thanks. Andrew, we really appreciate you coming out here today virtually, maybe next time in person. And in addition to your honorarium, you will be finding in your mailbox sometime shortly a Kelowna ambassador package with various swag and branded, not just Kelowna, but West Kelowna, Peachland, Lake Country, etc., that West Bank First Nation, that you can wear with these meetings with other cities as well.
Rest assured, I will wear it all the way around the lower mainland down here.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's perfect. Okay, next agenda item. Any new business for the advisory council today?